All right, chat. It's time for us to look at 538's unskew the polls for Biden. 538's fake news. This is the reality. Hey, Paul the IT guy. Thank you for the 5 tier 1s. I really appreciate it. All right, chat. 538 has finally released their model of the 2024 presidential election. Who is favored to win the 2024 presidential election? 538 uses polling, economic, and demographic data to explore likely election outcomes. So in other words, they take the polls and then they add modifiers according to the way they interpret these modifiers to change the results. And the answer to what's happening here is they are adding significant weight to Biden's side of the equation. That's it. They're saying the economy is good, therefore Biden is going to perform better than the polls expect. That is the fundamental belief underlying 538, which is the economy is good. So Biden is going to do better than expected. Now, what's very fascinating about that is, and this is something I tweeted yesterday, is a solid majority, I think it's actually over 60% of Americans, disapprove of Biden's handling of the economy. So when you ask voters, what do you think of Biden's handling of the economy? They say it sucks. Here's what I said. I said, this is funny because it's using economic data to push up Biden's probability of victory, while every poll has solid majorities of Americans disapproving of Biden's economic performance. The methodology article does all kinds of stuff like this, tipping the scale dramatically, and still the best they could do was concoct is a coin flip race. Anyone proposing North Carolina is a toss-up with the data available should have their account deleted. And that's exactly right. And here's the link to this tweet if you guys didn't see it. I need you guys to make sure you're interacting with my tweets more because I got banned for 12 hours for telling someone KYS, which is an acronym which means keep yourself safe. Whenever somebody is like having some sort of mental breakdown in my mentions, I always tell themselves to keep themselves safe. And somehow that was a bannable offense. I don't know why telling people to self-care is bannable, but okay. But when you get banned and they force you to delete a tweet, woke Elon, it's just like, you know, they kind of like knock you down on the algorithm. They don't like you anymore. So in order to get back into the good graces of the Twitter algorithm, you need people to interact with your shit. All right. So let's take a look at this. According to their simulations, they did 1,000 simulations. 4 times they had a tie of 269. And if that happens, that's a Trump win. So you can add the no winner to Trump's side, because the way the tiebreaker works is the person that wins more, the majority of states becomes the president. Does that make sense? Now, I can tell you this right now, that the 269 outcome is mathematically one of the most likely outcomes, actually. And it's very odd the way that their simulation works. And I don't know the methodology. I'm going to try to look at it with you guys raw. But if I had to guess, like before I go in, this is kind of my expectation, is that they just have polls kind of wrong in a coordinated way. Like each time they run a simulation, there's some sort of weight that's randomly applied to the current polling data so that it's wrong in a certain way. So like when you see these, like when you see this, the model where Trump gets 510 electoral votes, my guess is the polls are all wrong. 2 standard deviations in Biden's direction, right? Like that's not a reasonable outcome. That would mean Donald Trump won California, as an example. That's not a reasonable outcome. So why is this 1/4 as likely as a tie? That's silly. So let's take a look at the data further. Okay, so right now they have Biden winning 52 times out of 100 and Trump winning 48 times out of 100. This is another way of saying this is a true toss-up. 538 is saying we believe the race is a true toss-up with the pubic hair whisker leaning toward Biden. Now, this is, and I want to say this, according to the polls, this is insane. The polls clearly show a strong probability of a Trump victory. Number one, at the national level, Trump is actually up on Biden in most polls. If you go to a polling average, Trump is slightly, like half a point, better than Biden. And we don't elect presidents by the national vote. Now, if you go down and look at state level polls, Trump is winning, has won like every single poll in Nevada, Arizona, and Georgia of the entire year. Like there isn't any polling showing Biden winning in any of those states. It's crazy. So we're going to get down to that in a second. So right now, for example, The Economist just came out with a poll today from June 9th to 11th showing Trump up 2. Yesterday, the day before that, Morning Consult had a poll with Biden up 1. Then YouGov came out with a poll with Trump up 1. And Signal came out with a poll with Trump up. So like looking at the national polls, there's only one with Biden up in the last 2 weeks. Why is Biden favored? He's not winning in the national polls. What's going on? Okay, let's see more polls. So obviously the polls are not controlling things because Biden's losing nationally and Trump is winning at the state level. How is it that Biden is favored? There's something going on here. They are putting a systemic bias toward Biden. Our forecast launches just a week and a half after Trump was convicted of 34 felony counts of falsifying business records in connection to a scheme to pay hush money to a porn star during the 2016 election. Now, this sentence right now is completely irrelevant. Why is this sentence here? This is weird editorializing to what should be a data-driven site. Why is this there? I don't understand why this is there. Now, you could easily say Biden's son was just convicted of felony counts of having a gun, buying a gun while being an addict of drugs. And he's facing, you could say shit like that. It would be irrelevant. This is supposed to be an election forecast, not picking one story of many, like, for example, the Gaza genocide that's happening. Instead, they decided to pick this one, which is basically just a weird smear to throw in there. I don't get it. Mike, I work polls. The firms who distribute the surveys only want Republican voters. Bro, what are you talking about? They could have just said, they also could have said, he was after Trump was just convicted of 34 felony counts. Why are they adding this long ass clause? It's so weird. But that kind of tells you where their mind's at. So the people who are making this forecast are pro-Biden. That's all you need to know. I mean, if they were pro-Trump, they would probably put something about Biden's son, right? So right off the bat, reading this, this should be a red flag that this is not a scientific and data-driven, unbiased examination of polling data and trying to come up with statistical methods to get accurate forecasts. This is a Biden supporting group pushing a narrative that makes them comfortable Which, listen, I'm opposed to Trump too. I don't want Trump to win. But I want accurate data so I can make good arguments. And when I have inaccurate data that's biased toward Biden, that creates the idea that Biden can keep doing exactly what he's doing without changing a fucking thing. And that makes him more likely to lose. I want Biden to realize where he really is, which is down. He's down in the election. He's losing. He's the underdog. And typically when somebody's losing, when somebody's the underdog, they change their campaign. They do something differently. And an unvarnished look at the data would show that Biden's weakness is with young people. His weakness is with Arab Americans and Muslim Americans and young people and progressives. And those are the people that are most likely gettable for him. That if he changed his policies, if he changed his ways, those are the people that are most likely for him to get numbers to increase, to put him in the position to win. That's the data that I want to have. Did Biden shit his pants the other day? I wouldn't be surprised. He's extremely old and demented. Our forecast law, okay. Since May 30th, he has lost ground in the polls with his natural margin of the 538 polling average falling from 1.7 to 1.0 as of Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern. Now, guys, I want to say this, and I want to say this loud and proud. This is statistically insignificant, and it could just be random walk and noise. This is narrativizing, and this is not data science. This is crazy. Our forecast today thinks there is more room for Biden to improve, with economic and political fundamentals indicators pulling his predicted margin in the national popular vote from -1 to plus 2.3 points. And there you have it, chat. They are putting plus 3.3 toward Biden. What would it look like if they didn't put plus 3.3 toward Biden? The answer is Donald Trump winning a fucking landslide. There's another website called Race to the Race to the White House. They have a simulation. They have a simulation where they have their own model, and I want to compare and contrast the two. This is part of why you come here, chat. I'm not trying to give you bullshit, right? This is what the polling currently shows. Donald Trump 312, Joe Biden 226. That is what the polling currently shows. Donald Trump winning Georgia, Donald Trump winning Arizona, Donald Trump winning Nevada. Currently in the Nevada polling, Donald Trump is up 5.7 polling average. In Arizona, he's up 3.6 of the polling average. In Georgia, he's up 4.9 in the polling average. In Pennsylvania, he's up 1.1 in the polling average. In Michigan, he's up 0.6 in the polling average. In Wisconsin, he's up 0.3 in the polling average. And Biden is in danger of losing Minnesota. He's only up 2.7. He's in danger of losing Virginia. He's only up 0.8. He's in danger of losing New Hampshire. He's only up 2.5. So right now, there is a very likely outcome where Donald Trump hits 340 in the Electoral College or more. That would be an unsurprising outcome. Donald Trump is the favorite, and he's a big favorite. If Joe Biden was actually winning in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, it would be a toss-up, but he's not. He's losing. It's not a toss-up. It's lean Trump right now. Might even be likely Trump. Not a toss-up. But he still lags in the key states with his margin to just 1 point of Pennsylvania, the likeliest state to tip the Electoral College to either candidate within our uncertainty interval. And with 5 months left until Election Day, there's still a lot of room for polls to change. as indicated by the 1 in 10 chance of either Trump or Biden winning a landslide of more than 350 electoral votes come November 5th. 538's forecast is based on a combination of polls and campaign, quote, fundamentals, such as economic conditions, state partisanship, and incumbency. It's not meant to call a winner, but rather to give you a sense of how likely each candidate is to win. Check our methodology to learn exactly how we calculate these probabilities. How much of the tilt that I would like to know? So right now they have Nevada as a lean Trump, which is crazy because Joe Biden hasn't led. Let's look at the polling here. Where the fuck is a Biden poll? There's no Biden polls. There's no Biden polls. Every single one of their polls has Trump up relatively comfortably, except a couple have even. Citizens to Save Our Republic Super PAC, which is a Democrat PAC. And that has it even. Every other poll has Trump leading, some by like 8. And they have it as a 55% Trump? The very poll analysis you're fairly criticizing will be used by confrontators like David Pakman as evidence that Biden is the favorite and no one could possibly like convicted felon Trump. It's such a great economy. This is literally liberals telling themselves what they want to hear. The evidence is against it. This is what they call a purple state, by the way. If Nevada is purple, that's crazy. How do you not have Minnesota as purple? I mean, there's polls showing Trump winning. Now, it's a Biden-leaning state. But you have a Trump up 5 here. You got a Trump up 3. There's Biden up 2. It's not that well polled. Trump is certainly within striking distance. How is this leaning blue? VO made me another plate of food, chat. We have little apple crostinis. Fresh cherries and some apple. Wow. Wow. Thank you. Looks great. Unasked for. Braless. That's what VO said. Some cheese with that and I'd smash. There's ricotta. There's ricotta cheese on the toast. The 538 Economist Index forgoes including median housing price, but it says includes the number of housing constructed.
Which is this? So Elliot, let's put that in lay language. Is this nothing? Should people make nothing of this? Obviously, a shift of 1 percentage point that endures is a big deal because it's only about 1 percentage point that separates Trump and Biden nationally and just a little more than that separates them in the upper Midwest.
Yeah, a percentage point or 3/4 of a percentage point even could be the whole ball game in the election. The last election
but only if it endures, right?
Yeah, right. Only if it endures. So I think when we're thinking about does this conviction change public opinion, we can measure things in direct and indirect effects. What we're trying to do is look at the polls immediately before and after and assess direct effects on public opinion. And of course, those effects might decay. We'll have a pretty good guess in like 2 weeks over whether or not the race has really changed because of the verdict, and that will measure some indirect effects too. But there's going to be even more indirect effects over, the actual campaign that, has only just started and the 5 months remaining until election day. So maybe
somebody said that they were working with a progressive activist in Michigan and everybody hates Joe Biden. And I bet you that's definitely true. And there's no way that so I'm pretty, in my mind, I pretty firmly put Michigan in Trump's camp. I think that it's still possible that Biden could win there, but like the idea that if Biden's path requires Michigan, he's lost. He's not going to win. He needs to have a non-Michigan path to win, and he doesn't currently have that path.
It's like a lot, but it gets swamped by the indirect effects. Maybe we get it half a point now, and it's 2 points later. We don't really know. So I think we have to just look at the so-called direct effects on the public opinion for now, and kind of focus on that, and we'll deal with any downstream consequences when we get there.
Scan this QR code to go to the Apple and Spotify podcast apps to download the full 538 policy.
Okay, calculating polling averages. Okay, step 2, make fundamentals predictions. When GDP growth is strong, income usually rises and unemployment falls, and presidents tend to be reelected. Now, here's the problem with that. People don't think Biden's economy is good. So they're relying on fundamentals that may not actually accurately reflect what voters think of the economy. Job spending, personal income excluding transfers, manufacturing, inflation, average real wages for non-supervisory employees, housing construction, kind of trending down. Real sales for manufacturing and trade goods. Seems like it's trending slightly down, but relatively flat. Stock market measured by the... Okay, so we have stock market at the all-time high, primarily because of the AI bubble in NVIDIA. So if that bubble bursts, that's consumer sentiment. It's down in May from April by 10%. And real personal income at the state level. Usually when political scientists talk about fundamental economic indicators, they're referring only to objective metrics of the economy, but recently subjective evaluations of growth, such as the index of consumer sentiment, have differed significantly from actual growth. We don't know which type will be stronger predictor of voters' choices this year. So wait a minute. What is going to be a stronger predictor, do you think, chat? The way people think, or a number some nerd came up with? Please, somebody here, what do you think is going to be more important for people's vote, which is a choice they make? Their thoughts or some nerd number? We collect data for each of these indicators as far back as they're available. That raises another question. Are the rates of changes of these indicators more predictive than their actual values? So here's the thing that I want you to understand, chat. This is all bullshit. This is mumbo jumbo. This is crap. This is not based on any... This is just something they cooked up so they could do something other than just average out some polling numbers and then put it on a map. That takes a little bit of effort. This is all crap. They cooked it up, they're applying it, and they're saying it's real. It's unverifiable. It's mathematically and scientifically uncertain whether this has any value at all. And they're using it to drive the numbers and push them in Biden's direction. Does that seem viable to you? Does that seem sane to you? The political fundamentals come into play. Several political factors also impact the performance of presidential candidates. Incumbents, for example, have tended to enjoy a small boost when running for re-election, though that bonus has shrunk from its historical highs in the 20th century. We don't have any cases in recent history of an incumbent president running against a former president. Additionally, the voters may punish the candidate of the party controlling the White House if the president's approval rating is low. We apply a smooth rolling average to approval so that our fundamentals index does not jump around too much on a day-to-day basis. After all, it's intended to broadly represent overall conditions during the election, not provide a hyper-accurate prediction of vote choice. Presidential candidates tend to perform well in their home states. Recently, it's become clear that political polarization is decreasing the electorate's responsiveness to external shocks to the system. We see this in two mainstream variables. The University of Michigan's Index of Consumer Sentiment. Democrats and especially Republicans have become increasingly reactive not to changes in economic conditions, but to which party controls the White House. Presidential approval ratings are now dragged down by political and ideological polarization, with a shrinking share of the opposing party that any candidate can win over. This may partially explain why presidential approval was a poor predictor of the 2022 midterms. Star, 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 star. For this reason, our forecasting model this year will never fully phase out fundamentals-based predictions, even by election day. So in other words, they're planning on keeping this mistake rolling all the way to the end. Why can't they release a polls-only version of this? Why do they have only their model? Why can't they provide a model that's based on the polls alone? Why do they need to add all this junk data into it? When we say the appropriate amount, we refer to the weight that is derived by applying Bayes' rule to our predictions and their uncertainty. Formally, what we are doing is using our fundamentals-based prediction as an informative prior for what a polls-based model should predict the election vote share to be. You can think of a sort of a stacking statistical distributions on top of each other. When we have few polls or when it's early in the campaign, our model's predictions are mostly based on the fundamentals, with their standard deviation usually around 6 points or so. When it's election day in a state with a lot of polls, our uncertainty about public opinion is a lot smaller, so we put a lot more weight on the polling data in generating our final prediction. Until now, we have mostly talked about uncertainty in the fundamentals. Let's not talk about uncertainty in the polling average, since that determines the weight the model puts in the polls. The first is temporal drift in public opinion. So in other words, okay, I'm understanding their model now. My cousin is a statistics PhD working in the Census Bureau, and I had a fun chat with him this weekend. He impressed my knowledge of Garbo federal poverty line standards and that the expanded child tax credit have child poverty. I asked him, why would the Dems not renew that? How disproportionately would Joe Manchin's constituents benefit from that? Why does he oppose it? He laughed bitterly and gave me a knowing smile and said, that's not how these things work. Yeah. Imagine these things working based on what's good for the country. That would be a democracy. You don't live in those. The second component of polling error is industry-wide polling bias, or when surveys from different pollsters miss the outcome in a similar direction. Simulating different levels of polling error lets us look into potential futures in which polls have underestimated support for each candidate by various amounts. As with the process for simulating temporal error, we need both an estimated state-by-state correlation matrix and a value determining the spread of errors. We extract these numbers from a separate model that predicts historical misses in pre-election polls. This model tells us the average polling miss for each party's vote share in a competitive state is a hair over 2 points. or about 3.8 points on the margin between the candidates. We draw potential polling errors for the future from a fat tail distribution, specifically a student's t distribution with 5 degrees of freedom. A parameter that increases or decreases the likelihood of surprise tail events in our simulations. Error is always correlated across states, but the correlations fit using a similar method to the way we get correlations for polling average and simulate temporal error. These values, expected error, the distribution's degrees of freedom, and the correlation between states come directly from the historical model we train to predict polling bias. The model uses a Markov chain Monte Carlo to simulate tens of thousands of different ways the election could go, each time varying the hundreds of parameters in our model. Those parameters include major factors like how big the incumbent's bonus should be, or how much the president has historically been published for a bad approval rating, as well as seemingly tiny factors like the House effect for a pollster who does one poll in Missouri in late July. For each of these simulations, we usually call them draws and statistics. The Markov chain also picks random values from the distributions of fundamentals, temporal drift, and polling bias. There may be simulation with an optimistic fundamentals prediction for Biden, owing to the above parameter error and prediction uncertainty, that also explores a world in which he gains 5 points in the polls nationally over the next 5 months. Then we might find another simulation which the polls underestimate Trump by 4 to 5 points on the margin, a repeat of what we saw in the 2020 election. So in other words, we have magic bullshit in something that happened already. We have a demonstrated event being equated with a make-believe event. By repeating this process tens of thousands of times, we end up with a list of many different ways the election can unfold, which is what you see in the top line chart of our interactive. So this is what I would call a statistics nerds unskewing of the polls. And this is what the polling says if you strip out all the bullshit and you just look at what the data says, what the evidence says. Donald Trump is winning 312 electoral votes. Joe Biden is winning 226 electoral votes. Joe Biden wins the swing states of, and Donald Trump wins the swing states of Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. That is what the data shows. That is the facts. Now, does that mean that Donald Trump will definitely win all of these? No. If you asked me, Mike, what is your vibe? If you had to guess, how would you mark it down? I would probably put Pennsylvania as the slightest of the slight blue. I'd put Virginia slightest as a slight blue. I would put Minnesota basically tied. I would put Michigan as a recount. So this is roughly what I think it will be a week after the election right now. If I had to go by my vibes. I would have Michigan be slightly red. Did I say Michigan? I said Wisconsin is pure tie. Michigan I would have lean red. If I said Michigan, I was actually thinking Wisconsin. Wisconsin is a tie. Michigan has lean Trump. North Carolina, strongly Trump. Georgia, strongly Trump. Nevada, very strongly Trump. Arizona, strongly Trump. Something like this. Maybe like this. And I think Trump wins the swing district in Nebraska. Wisconsin is absolutely going Trump. I'm from Wisconsin. It feels like Trump country now. I have it as like basically a tie. This is my kind of feeling right now. If the election were held today, I think this is how it would come out.